5 years ago, Marine Captain Elena Graves was America's deadliest sniper, with 89 confirmed kills until one impossible choice in Iraq cost her best friend's life and shattered her faith in war. Now a civilian instructor, she's called back for an emergency mission, 8 Marines trapped in Afghanistan, and only she can make the 200-meter shot to save them. But this isn't a rescue, it's a trap. The Taliban isn't just executing prisoners, they're testing biological weapons engineered to target American military genetics, funded by defense contractors and protected by senators. The man who brought her back, Colonel Hartwell, isn't trying to save Marines. He's building evidence to frame her as a rogue sniper while covering up human experiments on U.S. troops. Now Elena faces the most impossible shot of her career, not at an enemy across a valley, but at the conspiracy within her own command. When pulling the trigger means exposing the truth but destroying everything she is, can a broken warrior prove that some shots are worth taking even when they cost everything? Because in war, the hardest shots aren't measured in meters. They're measured in courage. Subscribe for more incredible military stories that honor those who serve and the impossible choices they face. They wanted me to pull the trigger. Sniper's 2,000-meter shot against her own command. The morning sun painted long shadows across the rifle range at Marine Corps Base Quantico, where Elena Graves adjusted the scope on a Remington 700 with the methodical precision of someone who had performed this ritual thousands of times before. At 28 years old, she moved with the quiet efficiency of a professional warrior, though the uniform she wore now carried civilian contractor badges rather than the Marine Corps insignia she had once worn with fierce pride. Distance to target 800 meters, she announced to the squad of Marine Scout snipers arranged along the firing line. Her voice carried authority that came from years of leading men in combat, though now it was tempered with something else, a careful distance that kept her students at arm's length from the woman she used to be. Atmospheric conditions are optimal, minimal wind-clear visibility. This is your chance to demonstrate everything you've learned about precision shooting under ideal circumstances. The Marines responded with quiet professionalism, settling into shooting positions with confidence that came from weeks of intensive training under someone many considered a living legend. Elena watched them work, seeing in their faces the same determination and hunger she had carried 15 years ago, when she first discovered her exceptional talent for making bullets do impossible things across impossible distances. Among the students was Corporal Tyler Brooks, 24 years old, and preparing for his first deployment to Afghanistan. Brooks had natural ability that couldn't be taught, steady hands, exceptional vision, and the kind of mental discipline that separated competent shooters from true snipers. He reminded Elena of someone she used to know back when the world made sense and every trigger pull felt like serving a greater purpose. "Ma'am," Brooks said, as he settled behind his rifle, his voice carrying the reverence young Marines always showed when addressing her. "I've been studying your combat record. 89 confirmed kills across 4 deployments to Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. That's legendary status in the sniper community." Elena felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came whenever someone mentioned those numbers. 89 lives ended from distances where she never saw their faces clearly, never heard their final words, never had to confront the human cost of surgical lethality. Each kill had been carefully documented. Each shot had saved Marine lives according to after-action reports, and each enemy eliminated had brought her closer to the legendary status that Brooks mentioned with such admiration. But the numbers didn't tell the complete story. They didn't mention the 90th shot she hadn't taken in Iraq 5 years ago. They didn't mention the Marine who died because of her 2-second hesitation, or the 5 years of guilt that followed her resignation from active duty, or the nightmares where Danny Reeves bled out in her arms over and over again, while she tried to explain why she had prioritized the lives of children she didn't know over the life of her best friend. "Brooks, focus on your fundamentals rather than historical statistics," she said, her voice carrying a note of finality that discouraged further discussion. "In combat, your technical skills matter infinitely more than anyone's reputation. The bullet doesn't care about your track record, it only cares about physics." Brooks nodded and settled into his final shooting position, controlling his breathing as he prepared to engage the distant target. Elena watched through her binoculars as he made subtle adjustments to compensate for atmospheric conditions, his movements precise and deliberate. She had trained hundreds of Marines over the past 5 years, each one carrying her techniques and principles into combat zones where they would face the same impossible choices that had broken her. The thought used to comfort her. Now it just made her tired. Brooks's shot was perfect. At 800 meters, the bullet struck the target dead center with an accuracy that demonstrated exceptional marksmanship under controlled conditions. The other Marines on the firing line offered quiet congratulations, recognizing the skill required for such precision. Brooks looked back at Elena with obvious pride, seeking approval from the instructor whose shadow he was trying to step into. But before Elena could respond, her secure radio crackled with an incoming transmission that made her blood run cold and her hands freeze on the binoculars she was holding. "Valor, this is Overwatch. We need to talk. Marines are dying." The voice belonged to Colonel Vincent Hartwell, and hearing it after 5 years felt like someone had reached into her chest and squeezed her heart with a fist made of ice and old regrets. Elena stared at the radio clipped to her belt, feeling her carefully constructed civilian life beginning to unravel with 7 simple words. Valor was the call sign she had earned during a mission in Syria where she had held off an entire terrorist cell for 6 hours, allowing a trapped reconnaissance team to reach safety. That name represented everything she had once believed about being a Marine, courage under fire, sacrifice for others, and the moral certainty that came with defending the innocent against evil. But Valor had died in Iraq along with Danny Reeves. The woman who remained was just Elena Graves' civilian instructor, teaching young warriors how to kill from distances where human beings became statistics rather than souls. She excused herself from the firing line and moved to a secure location behind the range control building, away from curious eyes that had never seen their composed instructor look shaken. Her hands trembled slightly as she keyed the radio to respond. "Colonel Hartwell, this is Elena Graves. I'm a civilian contractor now. I can't assist with military operations, and you know that better than anyone. Elena, I know this is difficult, but we have a situation developing in Afghanistan that requires your specific skill set." Hartwell's voice carried the weight of 25 years of military leadership and hard-won wisdom about the realities of modern warfare. 8 Marines from a reconnaissance team are trapped in a mountain valley with a Taliban commander who is systematically executing prisoners. You're the only sniper with the experience and demonstrated capability to attempt the rescue shot we need. Elena closed her eyes and tried to push away the memories that Hartwell's voice brought flooding back. 5 years ago, she had been the epitome of Marine Corps precision, shooting a sniper whose reputation was built on technical excellence and unwavering commitment to the mission. She had been proud of her kill count, proud of her ability to eliminate threats at extreme range, proud of every life she had saved through surgical elimination of enemy combatants. Then Iraq happened. Then Danny died. Then everything she believed about herself shattered like a scope lens hit by enemy fire. "Sir, I haven't fired a combat shot in 5 years. I'm not qualified for active operations anymore. There are dozens of qualified snipers still on active duty who can handle whatever situation you're facing. Elena, you're the most qualified sniper the Marine Corps has produced in the last 20 years. Those 89 confirmed kills that Brooks mentioned, they represent a level of technical mastery and combat effectiveness that very few operators in history have achieved. We need Valor for this mission, not Elena Graves, the civilian instructor." Hartwell's deliberate use of her old call sign hit her like a physical blow, bringing with it the weight of every life she had taken and the one life she had failed to save. Valor. The name had meant something once. Now it just felt like a ghost haunting her from a past she couldn't escape, no matter how many miles she put between herself and the battlefield. "Colonel, what happened in Iraq?" "Elena, what happened in Iraq was that you were presented with an impossible tactical scenario that had no good solutions. You made a choice under extreme pressure, and a good Marine died. But Marcus Williams didn't die because you hesitated. He died because war is unpredictable and chaotic, and sometimes good people get killed despite everyone's best efforts." "Sir, I had the shot. The ISIS sniper was exposed for less than 3 seconds. If I had taken that shot immediately without worrying about the children he was using as human shields, Danny would be alive today. That's not war being unpredictable. That's me failing to execute when execution mattered most." Hartwell was quiet for several long seconds. When he spoke again, his voice carried a tone Elena remembered from tactical briefings before particularly dangerous missions, the sound of a commander who was about to ask his people to do something that might get them killed. Elena, the Marines who are trapped right now, their team leader is Gunnery Sergeant Connor Wade. Do you remember him? Elena's breath caught. Connor Wade had been one of her students 3 years ago, a talented young sergeant with exceptional aptitude for long-range marksmanship and tactical planning. She remembered him as intense, dedicated, and absolutely committed to the Marines under his command, the kind of leader who would die before abandoning his team. I remember Wade. What's his tactical situation? His reconnaissance team was conducting surveillance on a Taliban stronghold in the Korangal Valley when they were ambushed and trapped in a narrow ravine with limited defensive positions. The Taliban commander, a veteran fighter named Rashid Khalid, is known for psychological warfare tactics and his practice of executing captured Americans in elaborate public displays designed to demoralize coalition forces and inspire terrorist recruitment. Elena felt sick to her stomach thinking about Wade and his team trapped and helpless while an enemy commander used them for propaganda purposes. How many casualties so far? 2 killed in action during the initial ambush. 6 survivors, including Wade, who was wounded but remains operational. Khalid is eliminating them one by one, broadcasting the executions on social media to maximize psychological impact. Next execution is scheduled in approximately 5 hours. The tactical data that Hartwell transmitted to her secure device made Elena's hands shake as she reviewed the information. The rescue shot would require engaging Khalid from a range of nearly 2,000 meters in mountainous terrain, with variable wind conditions and extreme elevation differences between the potential firing position and the target area. It was a shot that pushed the absolute limits of both equipment, capability, and human skill, the kind of challenge that Elena would have once relished as the ultimate test of her abilities. Sir, a 2,000-meter shot in those environmental conditions is at the very edge of what's technically possible, even with optimal equipment and preparation. The probability of success under perfect circumstances would be maybe 40 to 50% at best. Elena, you've made shots at that range before. During your deployment to Syria in 2019, you eliminated a high-value target at 2,100 meters under similar environmental conditions. The technical achievement earned you a Navy Cross for exceptional marksmanship in combat. Elena remembered the Syria shot with painful clarity, one of her most technically challenging kills, requiring 40 minutes of careful calculation and environmental assessment before taking a single shot that had eliminated a terrorist commander who was directing mortar attacks on American positions. The technical achievement had earned her commendations and recognition, but it had also marked the beginning of her doubts about the moral implications of reducing human beings to ballistic equations. Colonel, that was 5 years ago. I'm not the same person anymore. I'm not sure I'm capable of making that kind of shot under combat stress, and I'm absolutely certain I'm not capable of dealing with the consequences if I miss. You're exactly the same person, Elena. You're a Marine who cares more about saving lives than about personal recognition or career advancement. That's why you hesitated in Iraq, because you valued the lives of innocent children more than your own reputation. And that's exactly why you're the only person I trust to make this shot in Afghanistan. Elena felt herself being pulled back into the world of military decision-making and life-or-death consequences that she had tried so hard to escape. Part of her wanted to refuse Hartwell's request to remain safely distant in her role as a civilian instructor, where her mistakes would never cost lives and her nightmares were just nightmares rather than memories. But another part of her, the part that had earned the call sign Valor during years of combat operations, was responding to the knowledge that Marines were dying while she debated the personal risks of operational re-engagement. The sound of continued rifle fire from the training range reminded her of where she was surrounded by young Marines like Tyler Brooks, who looked up to her as a role model and mentor. These were the same kind of warriors who were trapped in Afghanistan right now, counting on someone with her skills to bring them home alive. Warriors like Danny Reeves had been before her hesitation had cost him everything. Sir, if I agreed to this mission, I need you to understand something. I'm doing this because Marines need help, not because the Corps suddenly needs my particular skills, Ian, after 5 years of managing perfectly well without me. And I'm doing this for Wade and his team, not for you or anyone else in the chain of command. Understood completely. Can you be at Dover Air Force Base in 6 hours for mission briefing and deployment? Elena looked back at the rifle range where her students were continuing their training exercises, blissfully unaware that their instructor was being recruited for a mission that would test everything she had ever learned about precision, shooting, and moral courage. She thought about Danny Reeves and the promise she had made at his funeral to never again let her hesitation cost Marine lives. She thought about Connor Wade and 7 other Marines waiting in a mountain valley for someone skilled enough and brave enough to attempt an impossible shot. "I'll be there in 4 hours." The flight from Quantico to Dover gave Elena time to think about what she was walking into, though thinking only made her more certain that this mission was a terrible idea that she was pursuing anyway because Marines needed help, and she was apparently incapable of saying no when that particular need arose. She tried to tell herself that this was just one mission, one shot, one chance to prove that Danny's death hadn't completely destroyed her ability to function as a sniper, but she knew herself well enough to recognize the lie. This wasn't about proving anything. This was about guilt and redemption, and the desperate hope that maybe saving Wade's team would somehow balance the cosmic scales for failing to save Danny 5 years ago. It was irrational and probably psychologically unhealthy, but it was also undeniably true. Dover Air Force Base looked exactly the same as it had during her active duty years, massive cargo aircraft being loaded with equipment and personnel support crews, working with practiced efficiency and the controlled chaos of military logistics in constant motion. Elena felt oddly comforted by the familiar environment, as if stepping back onto a military installation somehow made her belong to something larger than herself again. The mission briefing room was secured and classified, filled with tactical displays and communication equipment that represented the cutting edge of military technology. Waiting for her were 2 operators she recognized from her active duty career, Staff Sergeant Rachel Donovan and Corporal Tyler Brooks, both veteran snipers with extensive combat experience. Rachel Donovan was a legend in her own right. 32 years old with multiple combat deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, she had lost her left leg below the knee to an IED in Fallujah, but had fought to remain on active duty with a prosthetic limb that she wore with the same matter-of-fact competence she brought to everything else in her life. She was one of the best spotters in the Marine Corps, with an almost supernatural ability to read environmental conditions and calculate ballistic solutions under combat stress. "Valor," Rachel said with obvious relief when Elena entered the briefing room. "When we heard you were coming out of retirement for this mission, we knew Wade's team actually had a fighting chance." Elena checked the precision rifle that had been prepared for her, a custom-built .338 Lapua Magnum representing the absolute pinnacle of sniper weapon technology. Holding it again brought back memories of every life she had taken with similar weapons, every decision she had made in combat, every moment when her finger had found the trigger and changed someone's world forever. "I'm not out of retirement, Rachel. I'm here to help with one specific situation, and then I'm going back to teaching civilians how to shoot paper targets at comfortable distances." But even as she said it, Elena felt the familiar anticipation building that had defined her military career for so many years. She was becoming Valor again whether she wanted to or not. The Marine sniper who had earned legendary status through technical excellence and unwavering commitment to protecting fellow Marines from threats they couldn't see or engage themselves. Tyler Brooks looked nervous but determined, clearly honored to be working alongside someone whose reputation had shaped his own career aspirations. "Ma'am, the tactical situation has deteriorated since Colonel Hartwell's initial contact. Khalid executed another Marine about 2 hours ago. We're down to 5 survivors now, and Wade was wounded trying to protect his team from the executioners." Elena felt her jaw tighten with anger at the image of Marines being systematically murdered while politicians and generals planned rescue operations. "What's the current timeline for insertion and engagement?" The mission briefing that followed revealed the full complexity of the tactical situation that Elena was being asked to resolve with a single bullet. Wade's team had been conducting surveillance on Rashid Khalid as part of a larger operation to disrupt Taliban command structures in eastern Afghanistan. But intelligence had failed to identify the true scope of Khalid's forces, and the Marines had walked directly into an ambush that had been carefully planned to capture rather than kill American prisoners. "Khalid is using the captured Marines as propaganda tools," Rachel explained, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "He's broadcasting their executions live on social media platforms timed to maximize psychological impact on American forces deployed throughout the region, and on civilian populations back home who are already questioning the mission in Afghanistan. Elena studied the tactical displays showing Wade's defensive position and the surrounding terrain. The Marines were trapped in a rocky outcropping that provided some defensive advantages, but was completely surrounded by higher ground that gave Khalid's forces overwhelming tactical superiority. Any attempt at ground assault or helicopter extraction would result in massive casualties and likely failure. What's our insertion plan and timeline? Halo jump into a landing zone approximately 15 kilometers from Wade's position, Rachel replied, pulling up a topographical map. Then overland movement through hostile territory to establish a concealed sniper hide site with line of sight to Khalid's command position. You'll have essentially one shot to eliminate him and create enough chaos and confusion in his command structure for Wade's team to break contact and reach a secondary extraction point. Elena nodded slowly, understanding that the entire mission's success would depend on her ability to make a shot that was at the absolute edge of technical possibility. There would be no second chances, no opportunity to adjust for equipment malfunctions or environmental surprises, no backup plan if her first shot missed. One bullet at maximum range under combat conditions with 5 Marines' lives depending on perfect execution. But as the aircraft carrying Elena and her small team approached the drop zone over Afghanistan hours later, her secure radio crackled with an encrypted message that fundamentally changed her understanding of what this mission was really about. Valor, this is Overwatch Prime. The voice belonged to General Robert Donovan, the commanding officer for Marine Special Operations Worldwide and one of the highest-ranking officers in the entire Corps. I need you to understand that this mission has operational complications that extend well beyond the immediate tactical requirement of rescuing Wade's team. Elena felt her instincts screaming warnings even before Donovan explained what those complications might be. What kind of complications are we talking about, sir? Rashid Khalid has been working in cooperation with an American defense contractor to conduct field testing of biological weapons on captured coalition forces. The executions that he's broadcasting aren't just propaganda theater. They're carefully documented trials of weaponized pathogens designed to target specific genetic markers. The revelation hit Elena like a physical blow that knocked the air from her lungs. General, are you telling me that American companies are actively supporting biological weapons research using captured Marines as experimental test subjects? I'm telling you that someone in the American defense industry has been using the war in Afghanistan as a testing ground for weapon systems that violate every international treaty on biological and chemical warfare. Khalid is being paid substantial amounts of money to provide test subjects and document the results with clinical precision. Elena tried to process what she was hearing while the aircraft continued its approach to the drop zone. The implications were staggering, not just a Taliban commander executing prisoners, but an organized conspiracy involving American contractors conducting illegal human experimentation on U.S. military personnel. Sir, who else knows about this biological weapons program? Very few people, and most of them would prefer that the information remain buried along with anyone who might be able to expose it publicly. Your mission isn't just to rescue Wade's team, Elena. Your real mission is to ensure that evidence of this biological weapons program reaches the right people in Washington who can actually do something about it. The aircraft's warning lights flashed red as they approached the drop zone. Elena and her team began final preparations for the Halo jump that would take her back into combat operations for the first time in 5 years. But this mission was fundamentally different from anything she'd experienced during her active duty career. She wasn't just fighting Taliban insurgents in a foreign country. She was fighting a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of American corporate and political power structures. Rachel Tyler, she said as they moved toward the aircraft's rear ramp. This operation is significantly more complicated than a straightforward rescue mission. What do you mean, ma'am? Tyler asked, his young face showing the confusion of someone who still believed in the fundamental moral clarity of military service and American intentions. We're not just saving Marines from enemy captivity. We're gathering and protecting evidence of biological weapons testing being conducted on American prisoners of war with American funding and American oversight. The 3 operators jumped into the darkness above Afghanistan, their parachutes deploying silently as they descended toward a mission that would test everything Elena had ever learned about duty honor and the true cost of protecting American lives from threats foreign and domestic. As she fell through the night sky above one of the world's most dangerous and complicated battlefields, Elena Graves felt valor awakening fully for the first time in 5 years, ready to prove that some Marines never really leave the fight. They just wait for the moment when their brothers and sisters need them most. But in the back of her mind, a terrible suspicion was already growing. The timing of this mission felt too convenient. The intelligence about biological weapons too detailed for a rapidly developing tactical situation. The fact that Colonel Hartwell had specifically requested her involvement after 5 years of zero contact. It all felt too carefully orchestrated, too perfectly designed to bring her back into play. As if someone wanted her here for reasons that had absolutely nothing to do with rescuing Marines. The ground rushed up to meet her through the darkness, and Elena realized with cold certainty that she was descending into more than just enemy territory. She was falling into a trap that had been carefully prepared over months or possibly years, orchestrated by people who understood her psychological profile and moral weaknesses better than she understood them herself. Either way, she was exactly where a Marine sniper belonged, standing between enemy forces and the lives she had sworn to protect, even if the true enemy turned out to be wearing the same uniform she had once worn with such unquestioning pride and faith. The insertion into Afghanistan went flawlessly from a technical perspective, with Elena and her team landing in a remote valley approximately 15 kilometers from Wade's last known position. The night air was thin and cold at 8,000 feet of elevation, carrying the distinctive scent of dust and distant smoke from Taliban cooking fires scattered throughout the mountain valleys. Elena moved through the darkness with the fluid efficiency of someone who had spent years operating in hostile territory, her enhanced night vision equipment turning the landscape into a green-tinted maze of rocks and shadows and potential threats. "Radio check," she whispered into her throat microphone as the team gathered their parachutes and prepared for the overland movement toward their objective. "Donovan, good copy," came Rachel's immediate response. "Brooks, good to go," Tyler confirmed. Elena felt the familiar rhythm of military operations settling over her consciousness, like a coat she had worn so many times it conformed perfectly to her body. Despite 5 years away from active duty combat operations, her body remembered all the movements, her mind automatically cataloged threats and opportunities, and her hands found their way to weapons and equipment with unconscious precision born of endless repetition. But something felt fundamentally wrong about this mission in ways she couldn't quite articulate. The intelligence briefing had been too clean, too detailed, too comprehensive for a rapidly developing tactical situation. Real combat operations were messy and confused, filled with contradictory information and constant last-minute changes. This mission felt choreographed, as if someone had been planning it for months rather than hours. "Valor, this is Overwatch." Colonel Hartwell's voice crackled through her earpiece as they began the 80-kilometer movement toward Wade's position. "We're tracking Taliban movement patterns around the target area through drone surveillance. Current assessment indicates Khalid has established a security perimeter with approximately 60 fighters in defensive positions." Elena processed the tactical information while navigating through a boulder field that provided excellent concealment but significantly slowed their movement speed. 60 Taliban fighters was a substantial force, far more than would typically be required to contain 8 trapped Marines with limited ammunition and no support. It suggested that Khalid was either expecting a rescue attempt or had some other operational reason for maintaining such a large presence in this particular area. "Overwatch, what's the current status on close air support availability for this mission?" "Negative on CAS Valor. This is a classified black operation with minimal official oversight and maximum deniability requirements. You're operating independently until extraction window opens." Another significant warning sign that something about this mission wasn't what it appeared to be. Marine reconnaissance teams always had multiple layers of support available, including helicopter gunships, fixed-wing aircraft, and artillery fire support. The fact that she was being sent into a combat zone with no backup whatsoever suggested that someone wanted this mission to have maximum plausible deniability if things went wrong. 2 hours into the overland movement, Rachel raised her hand in the tactical signal for immediate halt and pointed toward a distant ridge where thermal imaging signatures indicated the presence of multiple enemy combatants moving in coordinated patterns. Through her rifle scope, Elena could see Taliban fighters moving with a level of tactical discipline and coordination that was completely inconsistent with typical insurgent behavior. "These fighters aren't local militia recruits," Rachel whispered, studying the enemy positions through her own optical equipment. "They're moving like professional soldiers, formal military training, and established tactical doctrine." Elena had reached exactly the same conclusion. Rashid Khalid was supposedly a mid-level Taliban commander operating in a remote mountain valley, but the forces under his command were demonstrating a level of tactical sophistication and coordinated movement that suggested extensive professional training from someone with access to modern military methodology. Brooks established an overwatch position and monitor our rear approach for enemy activity. Donovan were moving forward to the primary hide site. The team crept through the darkness toward a rocky outcropping that would provide both concealment and an unobstructed firing lane to Wade's defensive position. But as they approached the predetermined sniper hide location, Elena's radio crackled with an urgent transmission from a completely unexpected source that changed everything. "Valor, this is Broken Arrow. Do not trust Overwatch. I say again, do not trust Overwatch." The transmission was weak and heavily encrypted, but Elena recognized the voice immediately. Gunnery Sergeant Connor Wade was somehow able to transmit despite being held prisoner, which meant he had maintained access to communications equipment and enough operational security to send warnings without alerting his captors. "Broken Arrow, this is Valor. Authenticate and report your current status." Authentication, Whiskey Tango 37. "Valor, we're not simply being held prisoner for propaganda purposes. We're being used as human test subjects for some kind of biological agent or weaponized pathogen. 3 of my Marines are already showing severe symptoms, including respiratory distress and neurological effects. This isn't a standard Taliban hostage situation." Elena felt her worst suspicions being confirmed in the most horrifying way possible. Wade's team wasn't just trapped by enemy forces, they were being used in human medical experimentation that violated every principle of military ethics and international law. "Broken Arrow, can you identify the nature of the biological agent you've been exposed to?" "Negative on specific identification, but we've directly observed American personnel on site. Civilians wearing protective biohazard gear, taking blood samples, monitoring our physical condition with medical equipment. Valor, this whole tactical situation was deliberately manufactured. Someone wanted us captured for experimental purposes." The implications of Wade's revelation hit Elena with the force of enemy fire. If American personnel were on site actively conducting biological weapons testing, it meant the conspiracy reached far deeper than corporate defense contractors operating independently. This was a sanctioned operation with official approval at high levels of government and military command structures. "Donovan," Elena whispered urgently, "we have a significant problem. This mission isn't remotely what we were told it would be." Rachel studied her team leader's expression in the green glow of their night vision equipment. "What kind of problem are we talking about? The kind that gets people killed for asking too many questions or knowing too many uncomfortable answers." Before Elena could explain further, Tyler's voice came through their earpieces with desperate urgency. "Valor, we've got the movement behind our position, multiple contacts approaching from our insertion point." Elena spun around to see thermal signatures moving through the valley they had just crossed. Someone had been tracking their movement since the halo insertion, allowing them to reach their objective area before springing what was obviously a carefully planned ambush. "Brooks, how many contacts?" "I count at least 20 fighters moving in tactical formation with night vision equipment. They know exactly where we are." Elena realized with sick certainty that their entire insertion had been monitored from the very beginning. Someone with complete access to their operational plans had provided detailed information about their route timing and objectives to Taliban forces, ensuring that the rescue team would be trapped in the same valley as the Marines they had come to save. This wasn't a rescue mission. This was an elaborate trap, and she had walked directly into it, despite all her instincts screaming warnings. "Donovan, get on the radio to Hartwell immediately. Tell him we've been compromised and need emergency extraction authorization," Elena ordered while rapidly assessing their deteriorating tactical position. Rachel attempted to establish communications with their command element, but her sophisticated radio equipment produced only static interference across every frequency. Valor, all our communications are being actively jammed by someone with access to our specific encryption protocols. We're completely cut off from any support. The tactical situation was deteriorating with terrifying speed. 20 Taliban fighters approaching from their rear escape route, while Khalid's main force of 60 maintained positions around Wade's trapped team. The rescue mission had transformed into a carefully orchestrated trap designed to capture or eliminate the one person who knew enough about biological weapons testing to potentially expose the entire operation to public scrutiny. Broken Arrow, this is Valor. We're moving to your position immediately. Prepare your team for emergency extraction under fire. Wade's voice came back weak but determined. Valor, negative on that plan. Khalid has explicit orders to keep all American personnel alive for the ongoing research program. He won't kill us, but he'll definitely attempt to capture you and your team for the same experimental protocols. Elena understood the tactical implications immediately. If Khalid had standing orders to capture rather than kill American forces, it gave her team certain operational advantages, but also confirmed beyond any doubt that she was walking into a psychological operation specifically designed to bring her back into active engagement under controlled circumstances. Donovan Brooks, we're dealing with a false flag operation conducted by elements within our own command structure. Someone deliberately lured us here. Who would orchestrate something like that? Tyler asked, his young voice carrying the shock and disillusionment of someone whose fundamental faith in military leadership was being shattered in real time. Someone who needs a convenient scapegoat for biological weapons testing that's about to be exposed through other channels, Elena replied grimly. They want me here because they need someone with my specific reputation and psychological profile to take the blame when this entire situation goes public. The approaching Taliban forces were now close enough that Elena could hear their movement through the rocks and boulders below her position, professional soldiers moving with sophisticated night vision equipment and communications gear that was far more advanced than anything typically available to insurgent forces in remote Afghan valleys. Valor, this is Nighthawk. A completely new voice came through her earpiece using a CIA encryption protocol that shouldn't have been accessible on her current communication system. I'm a field operative who's been monitoring this biological weapon situation for the past 8 months. Colonel Hartwell is not who you think he is, and you need to understand that immediately. Elena felt her world fundamentally shifting as another piece of the conspiracy revealed itself. Nighthawk, identify yourself properly with authentication codes. My name is Agent Victoria Kane. I'm assigned to the CIA's Counter-Proliferation Division investigating unauthorized biological weapons programs. Hartwell is the operational commander for a classified project that's been using captured American military personnel as test subjects for genetically targeted pathogens. Wade's team was deliberately sent into this ambush after they discovered evidence of American involvement in weapons development. The revelation that Hartwell, her former commanding officer, the man she had trusted with her life on multiple combat deployments, the mentor who had recruited her into the Scout Sniper program, was personally involved in human experimentation, using American Marines hit Elena harder than any enemy fire she had ever experienced. Kane, what specific evidence do you have to support these allegations against a Marine Corps colonel? Wade's team was conducting routine surveillance when they accidentally discovered a temporary laboratory facility conducting medical experiments. Hartwell has been using the cover of combat operations to test biological weapons for approximately 18 months with full knowledge and tacit approval from certain powerful elements within the Pentagon who believe such research serves national security interests. Elena processed this horrifying information while continuing to monitor the approaching enemy forces through her night vision equipment. If Kane was telling the truth and every instinct Elena possessed was screaming that she was then, everything about this mission had been an elaborate lie from the very beginning. Hartwell hadn't called her back to active duty to save Marines. He had lured her to Afghanistan specifically to eliminate her as a potential threat to his operation. Donovan Brooks, we have a new primary mission objective. We're going to extract Wade's team and secure physical evidence of this biological weapons program to transmit back to Washington through channels that can't be compromised. Ma'am, how exactly do we fight our way through 60 Taliban fighters with no air support, No artillery, no backup whatsoever. Rachel asked with professional calm, despite the seemingly impossible tactical situation. Elena studied the terrain around Wade's defensive position through her rifle scope with the analytical precision that had made her a legendary sniper. The Marines were trapped in a rocky outcropping that provided some defensive advantages, but was completely surrounded by higher ground that gave Khalid's forces overwhelming tactical superiority. A conventional direct assault would be absolute suicide with their limited personnel and ammunition. We're not going to fight our way out through conventional tactics. We're going to use their own carefully prepared trap against them in ways they won't anticipate. Through her magnified optics, Elena could clearly see the facility where biological weapons testing was being conducted on American prisoners. Temporary modular structures had been erected near Wade's position, with electrical power lines running from portable generators to what appeared to be sophisticated laboratory equipment. American personnel in full biohazard protective suits moved between the buildings with clinical efficiency, monitoring experiments that violated every principle of medical ethics and military honor. Kane, are you currently in a position to provide any kind of fire support for our operation? Affirmative valor. I have a precision rifle and clear fields of fire covering the laboratory complex from an elevated position. But we need to exercise extreme caution. If we damage the wrong equipment or breach containment systems, we could trigger a release of weaponized biological agents that would kill everyone in this entire valley. Elena realized that the biological weapons testing added a completely new dimension of lethal complexity to an already impossible tactical problem. Simply eliminating enemy personnel wouldn't be sufficient if those actions resulted in the catastrophic release of engineered pathogens that could kill American prisoners and rescue personnel along with enemy forces. Donovan, can you identify which specific buildings contain the primary biological containment systems? Rachel studied the laboratory complex through her spotting scope using advanced thermal imaging technology to track power consumption patterns and human activity. The main laboratory appears to be located in the central building with isolation containment units in the smaller structures surrounding it. The American personnel are maintaining very strict containment protocols, which suggests the biological agents are extremely dangerous, but also stable enough to be safely contained with proper procedures. That means if we can surgically eliminate the personnel operating the equipment without physically damaging the containment infrastructure itself, we can rescue Wade's team without triggering a catastrophic biological release that kills everyone. The tactical plan that formed in Elena's mind was audacious to the point of recklessness, but it represented the only realistic way to save American lives while simultaneously exposing the conspiracy that had brought them all to this point. She would use her legendary marksmanship skills not just to eliminate enemy combatants in traditional sniper operations, but to surgically disable an active biological weapons facility without triggering a release that would turn the entire valley into a contaminated death zone. Brooks, I need you to establish a defensive security position while Donovan and I engage targets at the laboratory complex. Kane, coordinate your precision fires with mine to ensure we eliminate all personnel directly involved in the biological weapons program before they can trigger containment failures or destroy evidence. As Elena settled into her final shooting position and began the meticulous process of calculating ballistic data for shots that would test the absolute limits of her abilities, her secure radio crackled with one final transmission that confirmed her worst fears about this entire mission. Valor, this is Overwatch. Hartwell's voice carried a tone of cold satisfaction that sent ice through her veins. I sincerely hope you're enjoying your reunion with active duty combat operations. You're positioned exactly where we need you to be for the next phase of this operation. Hartwell, I know about the biological weapons program. This ends right now tonight in this valley. No, Elena, this is precisely where everything really begins according to our carefully developed plan. You see, we need someone with your specific reputation and documented psychological profile to take full responsibility for a tragic biological weapons accident that's about to occur in this valley. The official story will describe how a rogue Marine sniper, suffering from severe PTSD and overwhelming guilt over past operational failures, attempted an unauthorized rescue mission that resulted in the deaths of 8 captured Marines and the accidental release of biological agents that killed dozens of Taliban fighters. Elena felt the final pieces of the conspiracy falling into place with sickening clarity. Hartwell hadn't just lured her to Afghanistan to eliminate her as a potential witness. He had orchestrated an elaborate psychological operation specifically designed to destroy her reputation, while simultaneously providing perfect cover for a biological weapons program that was about to be exposed through other intelligence channels. You see, Elena, certain influential senators on the intelligence oversight committees have been asking increasingly uncomfortable questions about our classified research programs. We need a dramatic incident that will distract public attention while also conveniently eliminating key witnesses who might otherwise testify about what they've personally observed here. Your legendary status makes you the perfect scapegoat. Hartwell's voice carried the casual professional tone of someone discussing routine operational details rather than the planned murder of American Marines and the deliberate framing of a decorated combat veteran. The absolute beauty of this operation is that everyone will instinctively blame you. The rogue sniper who finally snapped under psychological pressure and caused a preventable disaster that could have been entirely avoided if you had just remained peacefully retired like a sensible person. Elena realized with cold clarity that she was facing an enemy who understood her psychology better than she understood it herself. Hartwell had spent years carefully studying her operational history, methodically identifying her specific weaknesses and moral pressure points, meticulously preparing for this exact moment when he could manipulate her into a tactical situation where any action she took would ultimately serve his purposes. But there was one critical factor that Hartwell had fundamentally miscalculated in his elaborate planning. He had severely underestimated the absolute depth of her commitment to protecting Marines under fire, and he had completely failed to account for the possibility that she would be willing to sacrifice her own reputation, career, and potentially her life to expose the truth about biological weapons testing on American military personnel. Hartwell, you made one significant tactical mistake in all your careful planning, she said into her radio while settling behind her rifle and beginning to acquire specific targets in the laboratory complex below. What mistake would that be, Elena? You apparently forgot that I swore a sacred oath to protect Marines from all enemies, both foreign and domestic. That oath explicitly includes you and everyone involved in this conspiracy. Elena Graves' callsign Valor took her first combat shot in 5 years, beginning a precision engagement that would either successfully expose a conspiracy reaching the highest levels of American government and military command, or definitively confirm her new status as the rogue operator who had finally succumbed to the crushing psychological pressures of a career built on precision killing. As her bullet found its first target, an American technician actively monitoring biological experiments on captured Marines, Elena knew with absolute certainty that she was crossing a moral and legal line from which there would be no possible return. But she also knew that some lines were meant to be crossed when American lives hung in the balance, and the truth needed to be told regardless of personal cost. The first shot echoed across the valley with the distinctive sharp crack of a .338 Lapua Magnum round traveling at more than twice the speed of sound. Elena watched through her magnified scope as the American technician monitoring Torres's violent seizures crumpled to the ground, his protective biohazard suit punctured by a bullet that had traveled nearly 2,000 meters with surgical precision. One target eliminated, she whispered into her throat microphone, already smoothly acquiring her second target. Agent Kane's voice crackled through her earpiece from her concealed position on the opposite ridge. Excellent shot, Valor. I'm engaging the laboratory security team now. The coordinated sniper attack on the biological weapons facility had officially begun, but Elena knew they were racing against time as much as fighting against enemy personnel. Hartwell's Taliban allies would respond to the attack within minutes, and the 20 fighters approaching from behind her position would close the remaining distance very quickly once they realized what was happening at the laboratory complex. Donovan, give me current wind conditions and atmospheric data for the next series of precision shots. Rachel worked with practiced efficiency using her sophisticated range-finding equipment and portable meteorological instruments, rapidly calculating all the environmental factors that would affect bullet trajectory over extreme distances. Wind steady at 8 miles per hour from the northwest, temperature 42 degrees, Fahrenheit barometric pressure 24.6 inches, and falling gradually. Elena made careful adjustments to her scope settings, to compensate for the atmospheric conditions and acquired her second target, another American technician who was desperately attempting to secure biological samples from the laboratory or before fleeing to safety. The shot was significantly more challenging than her first, requiring precise compensation for both wind drift and the target's rapid movement across uneven terrain. She controlled her breathing with the discipline of 15 years of training and experience, found her natural respiratory pause where her body was perfectly still, and squeezed the trigger with the smooth, continuous pressure she had perfected through thousands of practice repetitions. The bullet struck the technician center mass with devastating effect, eliminating him before he could contaminate or destroy the critical evidence of illegal human experimentation. Two targets eliminated. Kane, what's your status on the security team? Three hostile personnel eliminated, moving to engage the laboratory facility commander. Through her scope, Elena could see Wade and his surviving team members in their makeshift prison area. The Marines looked gaunt and physically weak, clearly suffering from the severe effects of biological agents that had been systematically tested on them over the past several days. But they were alert enough to understand that a rescue operation was actively underway, and she could see them preparing to assist their liberators in whatever way their compromised physical condition would allow. Broken Arrow, this is Valor. Prepare for immediate extraction. We're clearing the laboratory complex right now. Roger, Valor. Be advised that the biological containment systems are powered exclusively by the portable generators you can see positioned east of the main building. If those generators shut down for any reason, the containment will catastrophically fail and release weaponized pathogens directly into the atmosphere. Elena processed this absolutely critical intelligence while acquiring her third target. The biological weapons testing was even more immediately dangerous than she had initially realized. Any disruption to the electrical power supply would instantly transform the entire valley into a lethally contaminated zone that would kill everyone in the area regardless of their nationality or allegiances. Donovan, can you identify the complete power distribution system for the laboratory facility? Rachel studied the complex through her spotting scope, carefully tracing power lines from the generators to various buildings in the facility. Valor, the power systems appear to be redundant with multiple backup circuits, multiple generators feeding isolated containment units through separate electrical systems. We should be able to eliminate personnel without disrupting biological containment if we're extremely careful about target selection. Elena felt a brief moment of relief, but it was almost immediately destroyed by what came next. Her radio crackled with Hartwell's voice, carrying a tone of cold amusement that made her blood run cold with rage and fear. Elena, you're performing exactly as our psychological models predicted you would. Every single shot you take is being meticulously recorded by high-resolution drone surveillance operating above your position. The official record will clearly show a rogue Marine sniper deliberately attacking what will be portrayed as a humanitarian medical facility, methodically killing unarmed civilian personnel who were courageously providing medical aid to Taliban prisoners in accordance with international humanitarian law. The revelation hit Elena like physical enemy fire. Hartwell wasn't just cynically using her as a convenient scapegoat, he was actively documenting her actions in real time to construct an elaborate false narrative that would justify continued military intervention against similar facilities, while simultaneously concealing the true nature of biological weapons research being conducted on American military personnel. You see, Elena, we desperately need comprehensive video evidence of apparent American involvement in what will be portrayed as an unprovoked attack on medical personnel providing humanitarian assistance. Your absolutely legendary marksmanship skills are providing us with exactly the kind of dramatic footage that will serve our purposes perfectly in congressional hearings and public relations campaigns. Elena realized with sick horror that every shot she had taken was being systematically used to construct a carefully crafted lie that would destroy her reputation while providing perfect cover for biological weapons programs that violated international law and basic human decency. Hartwell had brilliantly manipulated her into becoming the ideal propaganda tool for the very conspiracy she was desperately trying to expose to the world. But Wade's urgent voice cut through her growing despair with shocking clarity. Valor, there's something critically important you need to know immediately. The biological agents they're testing on us aren't designed as weapons against foreign enemies. They're specifically engineered to target genetic markers that are statistically common in American military personnel and their immediate families. The final horrifying piece of the conspiracy fell into place with sickening clarity. The biological weapons program wasn't being developed to use against terrorists or hostile foreign nations. It was being designed to selectively eliminate American military personnel who might potentially oppose certain political agendas or reveal classified information about illegal operations. Broken Arrow confirmed exactly what you just transmitted. Valor, the biological agents are genetically engineered to target specific markers that appear with high frequency in American military populations. They're developing weapon systems that can selectively eliminate American soldiers and their families while leaving other demographic populations essentially unaffected. Elena understood now why Hartwell had been so confident that his operation would ultimately succeed regardless of her specific actions. Even if she somehow managed to rescue Wade's team and expose the biological weapons testing to public scrutiny, the evidence would clearly demonstrate that American military personnel were the intended primary targets of the weapons program. The political implications would be absolutely catastrophic, potentially destroying public trust in military leadership for multiple generations. Kane, did you successfully copy that last transmission? Affirmative, Valor. I've been recording everything for immediate transmission to congressional oversight committees. But we desperately need to obtain physical evidence from the laboratory to corroborate Wade's testimony with scientific documentation. Elena studied the laboratory complex through her scope with renewed focus, identifying which specific buildings contained the most critical evidence that needed to be secured. But as she planned her tactical approach to the facility, Tyler's voice came through her earpiece with desperate urgency that indicated their tactical situation was about to get significantly worse. Valor, the hostile forces behind us are moving extremely fast. I count 20 Taliban fighters approaching our position with sophisticated coordination. We've got maybe 5 minutes maximum before they're in effective assault range. The tactical situation was rapidly becoming completely impossible. 20 professional Taliban fighters approaching from behind to cut off any escape routes, 60 more surrounding Wade's position in fortified defensive positions and biological containment systems that could catastrophically fail if damaged during intense firefight. Any tactical mistake could result in the deaths of absolutely everyone in the valley, including the Marines she had risked everything to rescue. Donovan Brooks, we're changing the tactical plan immediately. I'm going to attempt a single precision shot on Rashid Khalid from maximum range. If I can eliminate their command structure, it might create enough confusion and chaos for Wade's team to break contact and reach secondary extraction point. Rachel quickly checked the ballistic data required for a shot at Khalid's current position. Valor, that's a 2,200-meter shot in highly variable wind conditions with extreme elevation changes between your position and target. Even for someone with your exceptional skills, the realistic probability of success is less than 30% under these conditions. Elena had successfully made similar shots before during her combat deployments, but never under these specific conditions and never with so many lives depending on the outcome. The shot would require every skill she had painstakingly developed during 15 years of precision shooting, combined with the kind of moral courage and absolute commitment that had originally defined her military career. I understand the odds completely, Donovan, but it's the only realistic way to save Wade's team without triggering a biological catastrophe that kills everyone. Through her scope, Elena could see Khalid actively directing his forces from a command position on the ridge directly above Wade's defensive location. The Taliban commander was wearing modern body armor and moving frequently between positions, making him an extremely challenging target even under ideal environmental conditions. Kane, when I take this shot, I need you to simultaneously engage the remaining laboratory personnel to prevent them from deliberately triggering a biological release as a final desperate measure. Roger, Valor, standing by for coordinated engagement. Elena settled behind her rifle and began the methodical process of calculating comprehensive ballistic data for the single most important shot of her entire career. Wind speed and direction, atmospheric pressure, temperature gradients, target movement patterns, and elevation differences all had to be factored into a complex mathematical equation that would ultimately determine whether American Marines lived or died. But as she prepared to take the shot, Hartwell's voice crackled through her earpiece one final time with a revelation that fundamentally changed everything about the mission. Elena, there's one more thing you should know before you commit to this course of action. The Marine you've been communicating with as Wade isn't actually who you think he is. His real name is Colonel Benjamin Cross, and he's been working for our biological weapons program from the very beginning as an undercover intelligence asset. The revelation completely shattered Elena's understanding of the entire operation. If Wade was actually a colonel working directly for the biological weapons program, then absolutely everything she had been told about this mission was an elaborately constructed lie designed to manipulate her responses. Hartwell's voice continued with clinical precision. Cross has been systematically feeding you carefully selected information specifically designed to manipulate your tactical and emotional responses. The biological weapons aren't actually targeting American military personnel. They're designed to eliminate specific ethnic populations in strategic regions where we need decisive advantages. Elena felt her entire world collapsing as Hartwell revealed what he claimed was the true scope of the conspiracy. You see, we needed someone with your exact psychological profile and documented history to create comprehensive documentation of an attack on what will be portrayed as a humanitarian medical facility. Your shots are providing us with exactly the kind of evidence we need to justify massively expanded biological weapons research programs. But Agent Kane's voice cut through Hartwell's elaborate psychological warfare with urgent clarity. Valor, do not listen to anything he's saying. Wade is telling you the absolute truth about the biological weapons targeting American military personnel. I've personally seen the genetic profiles they're using in laboratory testing. Elena realized she was trapped in a sophisticated psychological operation specifically designed to paralyze her with doubt and uncertainty at the critical moment. Hartwell was using classic interrogation and manipulation techniques to make her question everything she believed about the mission, desperately hoping to prevent her from taking the shot that could potentially expose his entire operation to public scrutiny. Donovan, give me final ballistic data for the shot on Khalid immediately. Rachel provided the calculations with professional precision, while Tyler continued monitoring the rapidly approaching Taliban forces. Valor, you've got approximately 2 minutes before they're in effective assault range of our position. Lena steadied her rifle against the rock and found Khalid in her magnified scope. The Taliban commander was standing in a relatively exposed position, apparently confident that no sniper could effectively engage him at such extreme range with acceptable accuracy. He was catastrophically wrong about that assessment. She controlled her breathing using techniques she had practiced 10,000 times, found her natural respiratory pause. That perfect moment between heartbeats where her body was absolutely still and began the slow, smooth trigger squeeze that would send a .338 Lapua Magnum bullet across 2,200 meters of hostile terrain through variable wind conditions. But in the precise instant before the shot broke her, radio crackled with a transmission that made her freeze with her finger on the trigger. Valor, this is the actual Colonel Wade. I'm being held in Building 3 along with critical physical evidence that definitively proves Hartwell is running an illegal biological weapons program specifically targeting American military families. The man you've been communicating with for the past hour is an imposter using stolen authentication codes. Elena had less than 1 second to make a decision that would fundamentally affect the lives of dozens of people and potentially expose or permanently conceal a conspiracy that reached the absolute highest levels of American government and military command. She could take the shot on Khalid Ice and hope desperately that Hartwell's version of events was false, or she could trust this new voice claiming to be the real Wade and risk the lives of everyone in the valley on information that might be another layer of deception. In that single moment of absolute clarity, Elena remembered the oath she had taken as a young Marine more than a decade ago to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The biological weapons program represented a fundamental threat to everything she had sworn to protect, regardless of which version of Wade was telling her the truth, or lying to manipulate her actions. She took the shot. The bullet traveled 2,200 meters in approximately 3 seconds, crossing multiple wind currents. in extreme elevation changes that would have defeated any other sniper in the world. It struck Rashid Khalid's center mass with devastating kinetic energy, eliminating the Taliban commander and instantly creating absolute chaos among his previously coordinated forces. Target eliminated, Elena announced as she watched Taliban fighters scattering in complete confusion and panic. But the real battle was just beginning. Hartwell's conspiracy had roots that penetrated far deeper than a single biological weapons facility in a remote Afghan valley, and exposing it would require significantly more than exceptional marksmanship. It would require the kind of moral courage and absolute commitment that had originally defined her entire military career. Donovan Brooks were moving immediately to extract the real Wade and gather comprehensive physical evidence of Hartwell's operation. This mission isn't over until we successfully get the truth back to Washington through channels that can't be compromised or suppressed. As Elena and her team moved rapidly down into the valley toward the biological weapons facility, she understood with perfect clarity that she was fighting for something far more important than the lives of trapped Marines. She was fighting for the fundamental soul of an institution that had shaped her entire adult life and given her the skills necessary to protect innocent people from those who would harm them. The shot that had eliminated Khalid was just the beginning of her mission. The truly impossible shot, the one that would actually matter in the long term, would be taken not with a rifle and ballistic calculations, but with evidence that could bring down a conspiracy threatening the very foundation of American military honor and constitutional principles. Elena Graves' callsign Valor had reluctantly come home from retirement to save Marines in immediate danger. But she had discovered something infinitely more important in the process: the moral courage required to take an impossible shot at enemies who were wearing the same uniform she had once worn with such unquestioning pride and absolute faith. In the end, that was the shot that truly mattered. Not the ones that eliminated enemy combatants from extreme range, but the one that protected the fundamental principles for which good Marines were willing to die. The descent into the valley was conducted under intense enemy fire as Taliban forces attempted to reorganize following Khalid's sudden death. Elena moved with the fluid efficiency of someone who had spent years operating in hostile territory, her body automatically performing actions that had been practiced only until they became unconscious reflexes. Tyler provided suppressive fire while Rachel called targets and provided tactical updates. Valor, I've got visual confirmation on Building 3, Agent Kane transmitted from her overwatch position. American personnel are attempting to evacuate with biological samples. I'm engaging now. Kane's precision rifle cracked twice in rapid succession. Through her scope, Elena watched two contractors drop as they attempted to load equipment into vehicles. The remaining American personnel abandoned their evacuation attempt and barricaded themselves inside the main laboratory building. Kane, can you identify the real Wade's position? Affirmative. He's in the Eastern Isolation Unit with what appears to be another American prisoner. Both are restrained but alive. Elena adjusted her route to approach Building 3 while maintaining cover from Taliban fighters who were beginning to recover from the chaos of losing their commander. 200 meters, 150. The facility was much larger up close than it had appeared from her hide site, a sophisticated operation that had clearly been running for months with substantial funding and official protection. She breached the door to Building 3 with Tyler providing security. Inside, she found two men restrained in medical examination chairs, both showing signs of prolonged captivity and physical abuse. The first was clearly Gunnery Sergeant Connor Wade, older than his file photo, gaunt from malnutrition, but with eyes that burned with fierce determination. The second man was in his mid-40s, wearing the torn remnants of a Marine colonel's uniform. Captain Graves, the colonel said weakly. Colonel Benjamin Cross, Inspector General's office. I have everything you need to destroy Hartwell's operation. Elena cut their restraints while Tyler secured the perimeter. Wade immediately moved to a filing cabinet and extracted several thick folders of documents. Physical evidence, genetic profiles, test results, funding, authorizations, congressional approval documents. Everything. How long have you been held here? Cross stood on unsteady legs. 3 weeks for me. Wade's team was captured 6 days ago after they accidentally discovered this facility during routine surveillance. Elena rapidly photographed documents with her tactical camera, while Rachel transmitted encrypted data to Kane for backup. The evidence was damning: detailed records of human experimentation genetic targeting profiles, casualty reports, and most damaging of all, approval signatures from 6 senators and multiple Pentagon officials. "Ma'am, we've got incoming," Tyler called from the door. 20 Taliban fighters forming up for assault, and I'm seeing American contractors setting up defensive positions with military-grade weapons. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Elena needed to extract Wade Cross and the evidence while fighting through combined Taliban and American forces who were both determined to prevent any information from leaving the facility. "Kane, what's your assessment of our extraction options?" "Not good, Valor. The 20 fighters from your rear have linked up with Khalid's main force. You're looking at approximately 75 hostiles between your position and any viable extraction point. And I just intercepted communications. Hartwell has a helicopter inbound with additional security personnel." Elena made a rapid tactical decision. "Broken Arrow, can any of your Marines still fight?" Wade checked on his team members in the adjacent isolation units. "Davis and Thompson are ambulatory. Torres and Parker are—" He stopped, his voice breaking. "They're dead, ma'am. The biological agents killed them about an hour ago." Elena felt rage burning through her veins. 2 more Marines dead because of illegal human experimentation conducted by Americans on American soil. "Get Davis and Thompson armed and ready. We're fighting our way out of here." The next 15 minutes were absolute chaos. Elena's small team, reinforced by Wade's 2 surviving Marines, fought a desperate defensive action against overwhelming numbers while Rachel coordinated fire support from Kane's position. Tyler took a round through his shoulder but continued fighting with grim determination. Cross, despite his weakened condition, provided tactical guidance based on his knowledge of the facility layout. They were pinned down in Building 3 with ammunition running low when Elena heard the sound that changed everything: an American military helicopter approaching from the east. "Valor, this is Rescue 1, a new voice transmitted on Marine frequencies. "We picked up your emergency broadcast. Coming in hot for extraction." Elena felt a moment of hope, but it was immediately crushed by Hartwell's voice. "Rescue 1, this is Overwatch. You are not authorized for that extraction. Stand down immediately." "Overwatch, this is Rescue 1 Actual. With respect, I just received flash traffic from Marfacom directing immediate extraction of Captain Graves and all American personnel at these coordinates. We're coming in whether you approve or not." General Donovan's intervention, Elena realized. The general had been monitoring the situation and had authorized rescue when it became clear Hartwell was trying to eliminate witnesses. The helicopter landed under heavy fire, its door gunners engaging Taliban positions with devastating effect. Elena's team moved quickly, loading Wade's Marines first, then Cross with his precious folders of evidence, then Rachel and Tyler. "Valor, you're next," the crew chief shouted over the rotor noise. But Elena saw Hartwell's black helicopter landing on the opposite side of the facility. She made a split-second decision that would define the rest of her life. "Get them out of here. I'm staying to finish this." "Ma'am, that's suicide." "That's an order. Protect that evidence. Make sure it reaches Congress." The helicopter lifted off with her team while Elena moved toward Hartwell's position. She had 1 magazine left, maybe 30 rounds. Enough for what needed to happen next. Hartwell stepped out of his helicopter with 6 heavily armed contractors. When he saw Elena approaching alone, he smiled, the predatory expression of someone who believed they had already won. "Elena, I was hoping you'd be reasonable and leave with your team. Now we have to do this the hard way." She kept her rifle aimed at his chest. "It's over, Hartwell. The evidence is already being transmitted to every oversight committee in Washington. Your operation is finished. You think Congress doesn't already know Armed Services Committee approved Project Lazarus? Senate Intelligence funded it. Defense contractors lobbied for it. We have protection at the highest levels of government. Then I'll go higher, the press, the public. Americans won't accept genetic weapons targeting their own military families." Hartwell shook his head with what looked like genuine pity. "Americans accept what they're told to accept through carefully controlled media narratives. We'll spin this as a tragic accident. Rogue sniper with PTSD attacks medical facility, causes bioweapon release. You'll be the villain. We'll be the heroes who stopped you." "You're forgetting something, Colonel." "What's that?" "I'm still the best sniper this Corps has ever produced, and I've still got bullets." Hartwell nodded to his contractors. 6 weapons trained on Elena in perfect tactical formation, professional operators who knew exactly what they were doing. You're outnumbered 6-1, Elena. Even you can't win those odds. Maybe not, but I'm absolutely certain I can kill you before they kill me. The question is whether you're willing to bet your life on that, sir. They stood in frozen tableau Elena, with rifle aimed at Hartwell's head, contractors with weapons aimed at her, everyone calculating odds and angles and consequences. Finally, Hartwell spoke, his voice carrying a tone Elena had never heard from him before. Respect. You always were the best student I ever trained. Tell you what, I'll offer you a deal. I'm listening. Walk away right now. Take a dishonorable discharge. We bury Project Lazarus. Wade's team gets medical treatment. Everyone lives. You disappear quietly and we never speak of this again. And if I refuse, those 75 Taliban fighters converge on this position in approximately 3 minutes. The resulting firefight will damage containment systems. Biological release kills everyone within 10 kilometers of Taliban nearby villages. Somewhere between 60 and 90 people dead, including the 4 Marines who are still barely alive in those isolation units. Elena looked at the facility where Wade's team had been tortured and experimented on. She thought about Torres and Parker dead from biological agents. She thought about Davis and Thompson barely surviving. She thought about Danny Reeves bleeding out in Iraq because she had hesitated. Hartwell was offering her the same impossible choice she had faced in Mosul: save some lives by accepting moral compromise, or fight for principle and watch everyone die. But this time Elena understood something she hadn't known in Iraq. Sometimes the impossible choice wasn't really a choice at all. Sometimes there was only the right thing to do, regardless of cost. She lowered her rifle and keyed her radio to broadcast on every frequency: military, civilian, international. This is Captain Elena Graves, United States Marine Corps, call sign Valor. I am currently located at coordinates. She provided the exact location, where American military personnel have conducted biological weapons testing on captured U.S. Marines. Colonel Vincent Hartwell is operational commander. Project Lazarus has been approved by 6 senators and 4 congressional representatives with Pentagon oversight. Evidence has been transmitted to media outlets worldwide. I am requesting immediate international oversight of this facility. Hartwell lunged forward. You just signed your own death warrant. Maybe, but I signed yours too, and that's the shot that actually matters. Taliban forces were approaching fast. Hartwell's contractors were panicking as they realized every intelligence agency globally now knew their exact position. Hartwell understood his operation was completely compromised. There would be no covering this up, no spinning the narrative. He boarded his helicopter. This isn't over, Captain. Yes, it is, Colonel. You just don't know it yet. The helicopter lifted off, leaving Elena alone and surrounded by incoming enemy forces. She was out of ammunition, out of options, out of time. But then she heard a sound that made her smile despite everything. Multiple American military helicopters approaching, a full Marine reaction force responding to her broadcast. Extraction came under heavy fire, but Marines never leave their own behind. Elena was pulled aboard a helicopter as Taliban forces overran the facility. Behind her, she watched as international observers' aircraft began arriving, drawn by her public broadcast. Hartwell's conspiracy was exposed to the world. 6 months later, Elena stood before the Senate Armed Services Committee in her dress blue uniform. Network cameras broadcast the hearing worldwide as she testified about Project Lazarus. The physical evidence Wade and Cross had secured was presented: genetic profiles, casualty reports, approval documents. 6 senators were censured. 4 representatives faced criminal charges. Hartwell was arrested and awaiting court-martial. Project Lazarus was terminated and its victims provided medical care and compensation. Elena was cleared of all charges and offered reinstatement with promotion. She declined. Instead, she opened a civilian training facility in Virginia called the Reeves Institute for Veteran Services, teaching marksmanship for therapy, not combat, helping veterans transition to civilian life, providing PTSD counseling and job training. Tyler Brooks recovered from his wound and joined her as an instructor. Rachel Donovan ran the counseling program. Victoria Kane consulted on ethics and oversight. Connor Wade, after months of medical treatment, came to teach tactical leadership. 1 year after Afghanistan, Elena stood on her own rifle range, watching veterans practice precision shooting as therapy. A young Marine approached her fresh-faced, eager, reminded her of herself 15 years ago. "Ma'am, I heard what happened in Afghanistan. That 2,200-meter shot on Khalid Bayat, was that the hardest shot you ever took?" Elena looked across her range at veterans who were learning to heal. She thought about Danny Reeves and the shot she hadn't taken. She thought about Torres and Parker, who died in biological experiments. She thought about the shot she had taken against Hartwell's conspiracy. "No, the hardest shot was the one I didn't take in Iraq hesitation that cost my best friend's life. The easiest shot was Khalid, just mathematics and wind reading. The most important shot was the one I took against my own command. That one required courage instead of skill." "I don't understand, ma'am." Elena handed the young Marine a rifle. "You will someday. War doesn't end when you come home. It lives in the choices you made, the people you saved, the people you couldn't save, the shots you took and the shots you didn't take." "How do you live with that?" Elena looked at her students, veterans, learning that survival isn't betrayal, that coming home is victory even when it doesn't feel like winning, that finding peace is harder than finding war. You find purpose beyond the trigger. You help others carry what can't be put down. You remember that some shots are worth taking even when they destroy everything you are. Because the shot that matters isn't always the one that hits the target. Sometimes it's the one that protects what you believe in. The young Marine didn't fully understand yet. Someday, if he was lucky or unlucky, depending on perspective, he would. Elena watched her students train precision, without killing skill, without violence, warriors finding peace in a world that had tried to break them. Somewhere politicians still plotted. Contractors still designed weapons. Wars still created impossible choices. But here on this range, Marines were healing instead of dying. Veterans were teaching each other that the hardest battles are often fought after coming home. And Elena was proving that a sniper's greatest skill isn't taking life from a distance. It's knowing when to pull the trigger and when to lower the rifle. She thought about Hartwell in military prison, about the senators who lost their seats, about Project Lazarus shut down and its victims receiving justice, about the impossible shot she had taken against corruption within her own command. That shot had cost her everything she thought she wanted: military career, legendary status, the simple moral certainty of serving without questioning. But it had given her something infinitely more valuable: the knowledge that she had fought for the right thing regardless of personal cost. As the sun set over her rifle range, Elena Graves stood among warriors who had survived war and chosen to survive peace. Her hand no longer shook when she held a rifle. Her nightmares had faded to occasional echoes. The guilt about Danny Reeves would never completely disappear, but it no longer controlled her. She had taken the impossible shot, not across 2,200 meters of hostile terrain, but across the distance between who she was and who she needed to become. From Marine sniper to civilian instructor, from warrior to healer, from someone who took lives to someone who helped rebuild them. That was the shot that mattered most, the one that hit the hardest target, herself. And standing here among her students, Elena knew with absolute certainty that she had finally hit her mark. Far across the country in a military prison, Vincent Hartwell sat in his cell and thought about the student who had destroyed everything he built. He had trained her too well, given her skills too sharp, underestimated her courage too completely. In the end, Elena Graves had proven that the most dangerous shot isn't the one you see coming from 2,000 meters away. It's the one fired by someone you trained yourself using principles you taught them in defense of values you claim to share. Hartwell had created the weapon that destroyed him, and in the bitter mathematics of tactical irony that seemed somehow perfectly appropriate, the impossible shot wasn't impossible after all. It just required the courage to aim at the right target, regardless of what uniform that target was wearing. Elena had learned that lesson in Blood and Fire, in Impossible Choices. Now she was teaching it to the next generation of warriors, not as a tactical skill, but as a moral imperative. Some shots save lives by taking them, but the shots that really matter save souls by refusing to take what can never be given back. As darkness fell over the Reeves Institute, Elena locked the range and walked to her office. On the wall hung photographs of the Marines she had saved and the ones she had lost. Danny Reeves smiling in Syria before everything went wrong. Torres and Parker in their dress blues before deployment. Wade's team recovering in military hospitals. And one more photograph taken the day she testified before Congress. Elena in uniform, hand raised to swear oath, telling truth to power regardless of cost. That was the shot that defined her. Not the 89 confirmed kills, not the legendary 2,200-meter rescue shot, but the moment she chose integrity over survival, truth over career, courage over compromise. The impossible shot that hit exactly where it needed to, even though the target was wearing the same uniform as the shooter. Elena turned off the lights and went home to the small house she had bought near the Institute. No nightmares tonight, no guilt crushing her chest. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had finally found the one target that really mattered. Not the enemy across the valley, but the fear and doubt and moral compromise within herself. And that shot finally had been perfect.